Any apologies to note?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Gareth Lloyd and Edwin Roderick, and Powys officers Gwilym Davis and Clive Pinney.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Steve. We'll move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting. For accuracy, first of all, so they're in the pack that was provided. They go from page 3 to, I think, about page 6, they are. So just going through them page by page for accuracy, really, as a record. We got page 3, but I note that what you said, Gareth, about the recording that is your not Powys CC.
Yeah, that's
on that
page
one.
2, yeah.
Oh, page 2, sorry, okay. Well, and then the second page then, for accuracy, page 3, and finally page 4. So anyone who attended the last meeting, can I have a proposal that this is an accurate record of the minutes?
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thanks, Jake. And seconder for that, for the voting part of this. Were you here, Angela? Yeah, great, brilliant, thank you. So I assume everyone's happy with that then. Good. Any matters arising from these minutes that aren't on the agenda? There was recommendations which were passed in 4.10, but I think that's on the agenda anyway on page 3. Any other matters arising anyone else wants to bring up from the minutes? No? Okay, so thank you for that. So that's the minutes from the last meeting. So from the actions that came from the last meeting, of course, is item 3 on the agenda, which is the ministerial response. So we got a couple of things here. One of the officers is going to take us through this. You, Sarah, want to take us through this? Yeah? Okay, go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Okay, so as a result of the last SDP subgroup, we wrote to the Minister from Councillor Berman and Councillor Davis in Ceredigion, and we noted that we wouldn't be in a position to undertake a delivery agreement in this calendar year, as was the expectation of the Minister, and that if there were any possibility or opportunity for some of the funding that had been identified for those regions that had undertaken SDP to be sort of assessed, then we would be keen to use that to progress a collaboration agreement across the region. So the Minister wrote back quite quickly, and that is part of the appendix in the pack, and essentially acknowledged our letter and said that there was the funding had been earmarked, if you like, for those authorities that were progressing a delivery agreement. So there was no opportunity for us to access that funding as such. Now, I was made aware of that by the senior officer in Welsh Government, because they had only anticipated 2 regions being able to submit a delivery agreement this year, or potentially, and actually 3 are considering it. Now, we're getting very close to the end of the calendar year, so it's not clear yet whether they all will. But so he was already kind of overstretched on that budget, if you like. The Minister did, in the letter, say that there was a skills hub funding available. And this funding was proposed during the consultation on a resilient planning service for the fees consultation that was undertook earlier this year. And in it, essentially, it suggested that CJCs could be a vehicle for a skills hub in which regional skills that were missing could potentially have some funding to create a post. Now, I'm aware that in North Wales, this has been used to provide a more updated minerals and waste service, and so posts have been provided up there. We obviously, well, certainly in Ceredigion, and I think in Powys and Banau Brycheiniog, you also use the Carmarthenshire Minerals Service, so it's a similar opportunity for the North Wales authorities, effectively. And they have also moved a little bit into landscape impact in terms of developments of national significance up there. So that minerals and waste team are also looking at infrastructure consenting going forward and DNS schemes. So they're providing kind of backup resilience to the North Wales local authorities. So today, as I understand it, that's the only sort of skills hub that has been created, if you like. But there is still funding available in that pot, and the relevant officials at Welsh Government have raised it at POSU, for example, as to whether there were any other opportunities. So the Minister has made note of that and suggested that we consider that if we had a regional skills gap that we wanted to fill, or some hub we wanted to create. So really, that's all I wanted to take you through in terms of the letter. I would say almost what's not written is just as important, really. And what's not written in that letter is any criticism of the fact that we're not submitting a delivery agreement this year, really. So I think that that's fair to note, that probably that was within their expectation that we wouldn't in reality. And that's certainly the sort of acknowledgement I had from Welsh Government officials when I submitted the letter. So that's it from the letter point of view. Really, the purpose of this meeting then was to discuss whether this is something the group would like to progress and what that might look like going forward.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. From the letter, and I see that Councillor Jake Berryman has put some quotes from the letter related to what you were saying, Sarah. And yeah, the collaboration agreement, I think from Kerrygo's point of view, I think there's definitely work that we could do there, and there's certainly gaps in some of the skills and resources that we could definitely share. And our planning policy team definitely not have been sitting on their hands. As you know, Sarah, you have been doing a great job. We had 6 place plans done and now 13 changing places plans, so nearly 19 plans done for, well, in entire communities across Ceredigion, plus also the conservation appraisals and management plans we've done for all the towns as well. So we're bang up to date in terms of what we have ready on the shelf for any funding in the future for developing our communities and town centres. So yeah, I think, and I think, Jake, you mentioned right at the beginning of the meeting that there's something that maybe Powys could learn from us, and I'm sure we got stuff that we could learn from yourselves as well. So I'll bring you in here, Jake, because you put those comments into the chat, if you want to expand on those points.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you're absolutely right, Sarah, about what wasn't in the letter. So we weren't getting a ticking off. I think our position has been quite clear, and we've explained it over quite a long period of time, haven't we? And so I think we've got good understanding with both the Cabinet Secretary and with officials in Welsh Government about where our position is. But of course, we've also been clear that if we can get more through working together collaborative, which we have continually demonstrated between ourselves across Growing Mid Wales in particular, seeing that as a vehicle for both change and for opportunity between ourselves. And it is known that we're somewhat critical of the CJC and the attempts to keep adding additional functionality to it beyond the legislation, so I think there is more we can do together collaboratively. I think that we have clear skills gaps. You've already alluded to our buying mineral advice in from Carmarthenshire, etc. We're under significant pressure at the moment with 16 DNS applications for major wind proposals in Powys, and that is across the broader partnership area. The park obviously isn't in quite the same position there, but we'll be all too aware of those issues and the need for it to protect its boundaries and indivisibility, etc., which I fully understand and share. So I think why would we not chase down a little bit of resource to bring some expertise into Mid Wales in areas where we think we have a gap? If the money's there, we'd be fools not to look at that. Each of us has at the moment got gaps, I think, for things like planning enforcement officers, planning solicitors, probably development management, but that comes and goes a little bit. Definitely policy planning, across our areas, and we're doing slightly different things, aren't we? With yourselves pursuing the place planning stuff, which we have indicated as part of our Stronger, Fairer, Greener and our sustainable Powys approach, that we need to map out much more of that community-led, community engagement work in order to better understand exactly how communities function and how we can help them make them more resilient and sustainable. That's all part of that picture, which we haven't done as well yet. We're not as mature a view on, because you've used your planning resource in that space, whereas our planning resource is being taken up fully at the moment with finding gypsy and traveller accommodation sites and getting policies through the LDP and responding to wind farm developments, etc. So, and I know the park has got its own gaps, as I indicated there. So why wouldn't we do this? And I think there are some common areas, whether it's about major impact on landscape from major proposals, which we would all share, wouldn't we, that DNS side of things, or whether it is more of the place planning collaborative work at that level that is missing, or whether it's conservation, or there are gaps that I think officers could go away and agree and find, rather than us politicians trying to fill that void. Clive, sorry, I'm sure you'll have a view, but so I think, yeah, why wouldn't we go and get some money? And if we can demonstrate that we're working together purposefully, I think that plays into the agenda that we have, that where we can do things separately, yes, go ahead and do it, but where we can get added value from collaboration, we jolly well should and are doing it. And I think that's what I would like to get out of this.
I'm in complete agreement with you, Jake. As I said, alluded before I brought you in, we find the same sort of challenges as well in Ceredigion, and I think there's some things we can do. And you're saying, you alluded to the Growing Mid Wales and CJCs. We're working quite heavily collaboratively already, and then this goes along with the levelling up and the UK SPF money as well. And it looks like from where the growth fund is going, it's going to have to go down a similar route, really. They're looking at using the CJCs as the delivery for that. So we're already doing it in a way. Whether it's labelled as CJC, I'm not sure. But yeah, anyone else want to bring in any viewpoints from item 3 then, the response from the Minister? No? Okay, because we're moving into the item 4 on the agenda anyway, so we'll oh, Gareth.
Well, just to endorse what Councillor Jake says, Chair, I think from the National Park perspective, we similarly endorse regional working and collaboration, and anything we can do to assist capacity is going to be definitely a helpful focus for discussion. I think it is worth noting what Sarah said, that the other 3 CJCs are now all progressing their delivery agreements. So whether some of this work could help in terms of preparatory work, potentially background work for a potential decision on an SDDP is something to bear in mind as well.
Yeah, okay. No, fair point, Gareth. Thank you. Jake.
I just on that, I think, and I don't want to let my sort of personal views cloud anything, but in my leadership capacity and whatever influence I might have through the WLGA, I am corresponding at the moment through the WLGA on the manifesto asks of any incoming administration in May, with a new Senate being formed, and I won't try and double guess that, but I think we can see where different political parties position themselves in respect of CJCs. So we may or may not have CJCs going forward. They may or may not be in the form they are, but what we can have, which will be more lasting, is an agreement to carry on working together constructively, for the benefit of our residents. We can have that. Just in part of the response I wanted to share, and this may not get traction, but Gareth, you may have a view on this, but my take is that Future Wales is now so long in the tooth and is corrupted by out of date data, and I'm thinking in particular on wind farms at the moment, but a number of areas, the evidence upon which it is founded is now completely irrelevant. And one of the things I'm saying is that an incoming government would need to fully take that off the table, or to replace it, start a process of replacement. And in my view, and this is only my view, and I've shared it though, is that the the Future Wales, for those that haven't read it, goes straight from the introductions into looking at what the 4 regions look like and describes the 4 regions and has regional sections. So already we have a national plan with a regional content upon which we're meant to then do another regional plan ourselves. My view is that we would collaborate together to produce the regional sections of the new Future Wales, or whatever it's called, and that would be a meaningful collaboration, not like how it was done before, and that then we could just have a national plan with regional plans embedded in it, and then we could go straight to development plan lights in the future. That would save millions and massively reduce the resource required across Wales. So that's what my suggestion is. That's my ask, and therefore I'm not going to do anything that progresses work on an STP now, because I don't think that's the future in my head that I see as having in Wales. So I'll just share that now.
Yeah, no, fair point. And it's, yeah, bubbling up the ideas like that, I think is a good way of doing it. Sarah?
Interesting. Happy to chat about that, Jake. I think that's an interesting point, but outside of this meeting. But just on the SDPs and the delivery agreements, there's only 3 regions are progressing a delivery agreement, but as I understand it, only one has an actual budget identified. So the minister would be unable to sign off the other 2 because you can't sign off a delivery agreement without a budget in place. So I think at the minute, what they're proposing is to write out how they would do a delivery agreement, but not to seek formal ministerial sign-off. So there is a distinction there, because having one that you've prepared and actually having it signed off that is an agreed timetable with a budget for a set number of years is very different. So we could have progressed that other option, a sort of draft delivery agreement, but we didn't, because we didn't want to write something that we hadn't committed the budget to effectively. So I think it's just worth noting there's only one in my understanding, and the expectation from Welsh Government is there is only one that would actually be potentially signed off by a minister. The other 2 are very much a draft document.
Okay, fair point. Thanks, Sarah. And that'll be minuted as well. Okay, we've been drifting into item 4, as I said earlier. So the skills hub idea and collaboration, if you could expand on that. And I know a starter for 10 suggestions being put forward, but can you expand on some of the points you said there, Sarah, on that, and then we can bring other people in and some other ideas in terms of resource, etc.
Yeah, so there's a national recognised skills shortage in planning across England and Wales, and there are a number of initiatives such as Pathways to Planning to try and address that gap, but they're generally early career starters, so almost an apprenticeship scheme, which is most welcome, but there are sort of national skills shortages in very specific areas of planning that those current sort of schemes can't address. So Welsh Government recognised in their consultation in the summer that it may be that actually, rather than each local authority having a landscape specialist or a minerals and waste specialist or any number of different skills sections, that the CJC could potentially be a vehicle to host such skills hubs where it was pertinent to the region. So there was a lot of consultation back to Welsh Government on this, and I think broadly speaking, it suggests in the consultation that everybody was in favour of taking a more regional approach to specific skills that each local authority or National Park Authority could bid in for, if you like. Now, Welsh Government provided a pot of money. I'm not 100% clear, and I don't think they've ever actually advertised how much that pot is, but I think the notion was that if skills hubs bid into that, they would sort of find the money to support it, with the expectation being that the increase in fees agreed in the summer to local authorities could potentially fund it going forward. Now, I do have a slight issue with that in reality, because actually the increase in fees was undertaken on the basis of ARUP work to get to full cost recovery. So that was to make sure that planning authorities were recovering the costs that they have now, not to provide additional income that could potentially fund skills hubs or other types of initiatives. So I do think there's a bit of a misnomer there at Welsh Government level, and they should be mindful of that. And I have raised that as the chair of POSU, but it's outside the scope of this meeting. But in this context, they're offering for us to make a bid for whatever our need might be. So I did some very loose engagement with members and with other teams across the region to find out if anybody had a sort of view of what those skills gaps might be. And we understood that placemaking officers, so we've done quite a lot of placemaking work, has been mentioned, and that has been a shift for our team from LDP to that, and we purposely did that. But other regions, as Councillor Berryman mentioned, haven't had that capacity. For example, Adrian and the team in Powys are currently working on their LDP, and that is a very, very sole focus of your work. You haven't got time to do other things. So one suggestion would be that we could appoint somebody to undertake placemaking work regionally, or help local authorities to commission the work, and we could provide all the information that we have from our experience of doing that to that person. Obviously, we've kind of moved beyond that a little, but it's what's best for the region, not what's best for us as individual authorities. My personal view and my suggestion to this was that actually, from an SDP point of view, the number one issue across our region is probably infrastructure of an energy nature. And when you look at the 16 DNSs in Powys, the 7 DNSs in Ceredigion, the impacts on the park, we could really do with a specialist in this area to support proper management of community benefit funds, advice and guidance of procurement of specialists into shadow flicker and any number of issues that crop up with a DNS, just oversight of the work of individual LPAs on their DNS applications, so we could say that there was a regional approach to managing this. And also there's an issue here with, you know, cumulative impact. Ceredigion will be looking at DNSs from Ceredigion's perspective. Powys will be doing the same. The park will be doing the same. But actually, this is a region, and the landscape impacts cross over boundaries. And while we do try to work together, you do sort of have a Ceredigion hat on or a Powys hat on. So I felt like perhaps a shared role in that regard would be beneficial. I spoke also to Grow Mid Wales, and they felt that potentially that person could also assist in the strategic projects under the Grow Mid Wales banner and progressing those through the planning system. Having that planning input earlier might be supportive to them. There's also natural capital projects going on at the moment. So Ceredigion, for example, are hoping in the next financial year to create the first integrated constructed wetland in Wales. And Powys have similar schemes with the flood alleviation projects that they're working on and sort of water management. So somebody who could feed in planning advice to that area, it wouldn't just support those projects in the short term, it would actually be the foundations of potentially an SDP or a chapter of Future Wales, because those are our most significant infrastructure and strategic issues as far as my view, but I understand other people might have a different view. So those are some suggestions. And then a recognised gap that we know of is landscape advice. We do not have a landscape officer across each of the 3 authorities, and it's costly and difficult to get that expertise in. So that is a definite regional gap, but more akin to individual planning applications rather than necessarily a strategic issue, although it is a strategic issue when you consider energy projects. Obviously, we've pitched, if you like, that we would like to work to some form of collaboration agreement. So there is potential to look at a skills hub post that would progress that and look at how that might work and draft and prepare that collaboration agreement in consultation with all 3 authorities. Because whilst I am the SDP lead for the region, I don't really have the capacity to do that nitty-gritty work because I also run the Ceredigion planning teams. So somebody who could work on that. Now, I apologise to Banai Brycheiniog. They did make 2 suggestions, which I failed to include on the agenda, but I will talk you through those now. So I apologise for that. It came in the same day I sent the agenda, and so I accidentally missed it off. But 2 suggestions they made was that from a park perspective, they have a gap in terms of planning legal advice. And so potentially a regional planning solicitor is something that they would consider also. Now, I would just like to point out that we were very fortunate with our budget setting last year to receive a £330,000 uplift to our enforcement budget, which included the cost of a full-time planning solicitor. Now, so far, I've failed to recruit for that role because it is incredibly specialist. But I wonder if potentially there is some scope there for us to have a conversation about how we might share that resource so that we are doing what we said we'd do, which is collaborate. But I currently don't have one, so I can't offer anything right now, but it's certainly on my agenda that we would talk about it. And I apologize for omitting that. The other point that Banai Brecheniog made was that in the officer's view in that authority, there's no long-term training plan or upskilling plan for specialist skills in their authority and perhaps wider in the region. So if we do need a landscape officer, for example, or whatever, then at the moment there's no sort of funding or opportunity to upskill an internal member staff to develop those skills and then offer that regionally. So their view was that those should also be considered. So, but just to note, these are really early day suggestions, and I really welcome conversation around the table on what you think are the gaps and if I've missed any.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah, for that summary. Yeah, a couple of good ideas there. You know, how we developed our team. We've got these planning assistants, and we've been working them up to full planning officers, and it's worked really well in Ceredigion. It's something maybe the other regions can learn from on that as well. Adrian.
Yes, I mean, that's really interesting, and I can appreciate, you know, we do have these perceived gaps, and we're invariably having to buy in expertise. I think what Sarah's highlighted, however, is it may be difficult, you know, given where we are with some of these issues which Councillor Berryman's raised, is you know, we almost need to be able to hit the ground running. So, you know, to actually bring someone in and start to train them up may actually not work in our favour when we're under some of these pressures with regards infrastructure, so on and so forth. So it's actually finding that almost senior level expertise out there, you know, to come into the region straight away. That's that I suspect is going to be the big ask. And as Sarah's already highlighted, Ceredigion has been unsuccessful at the moment finding a planning solicitor. But if we want a regional planning solicitor, we should be planning at that level. If you sort of meet, you know, someone who can come in and do the work, you know, we feel we need straight away. Yes, we can have support and actually bring people on behind them, but it's actually having someone who can hit the ground running and actually be there to support us with all this work. Landscape work, for instance, is a massive and very involved piece of work. Shadow flickers, radar impacts, you know, there's a lot of stuff which has to be done, and it needs a full and complete understanding of all the issues, and it's not easily obtained from someone who's just starting out on their career.
Yeah, no, fair point. I know from a Ceredigion point of view, I've been observing that they've upped their game in terms of reach and style and channels to market. There's now videos, and it's much more personable and selling the region more as a great place to live and work, etc. And also recently, of course, Ceredigion have had awards at Wales level, RTPI. 2 awards were awarded to the planning team, so that's an attractor as well. And they were actually at the UK awards, unsuccessful, but still, Planning Authority of the Year at a UK level. You know, that's pretty good going for little old Ceredigion. So it could be in a help to attract that sort of resource, and who knows. But I have noticed that we're certainly upping our game in terms of trying to attract candidates for future possible roles in the authority. Jake.
You certainly are up in your game, and it's been noticed. And I keep forwarding links to some of the great work that Sarah's doing to professional colleagues here, and some of the HR stuff that you've been doing at the moment has been absolutely fantastic. You know, and I've fed that back to your boss, Clive, but also I fed it back to Emma, our chief executive, and that's put a fire under our team, or she's put a fire under our team to say, come on, look, you know, we've got to not match this. This is an arms race here of us doing that, but this is saying, do you know what, actually we can do this. And the point I've made in the in the chat box is that by doing this together, we become jointly more attractive. A planning solicitor for the CJC region or whatever, working for the park, and that's massive. Now, obviously, you've got to decide whether it's doable by one person or whatever between yourselves. And I'll leave that to officers. But in terms of it being attractive, marketed right, we are, how much of it is Wales? A third of Wales together, aren't we, between us ourselves, and obviously certainly with the park itself extending into other areas. We've got reach, and we should use those connections to say, right, actually, come on, this is a great place to come and work and do business and all the rest of it. So I think you're leading the way for us on that, and I think by collaborating we can take that work and project it even more strongly. So I really support what you're doing. Well done.
Gareth.
I think from the national park perspective, we would support all the areas which Sarah outlined. They're all areas that we would benefit from in collaboration. As a landscape designation, we definitely have challenges around commenting on landscape visual impact. We don't have any specialist in-house. We rely on NRW, who are increasingly pressurized in terms of the resource and input they can. So cumulative impact, individual and cumulative impact of large energy schemes is an example there that we benefit from. I think we do need to bear in mind that this funding presumably is temporary, and the idea of upskilling some of our staff and getting new officers in may help us in the longer term if we're unable to sustain the funding past the grant available.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, thanks for that. One thing in terms of longer term, just on that point, we're currently going in consultation with the Growth Fund for the future, and one of the key objectives is skills. So we may be able to use the Future Growth Fund that the UK government through Welsh government is going to be providing to the region, and that might be something that we could take advantage of, because one of the objectives there is skills. It's one of the things that we identified as we are looking at the consultation period of what we want to do in Ceredigion. But I would think Powys is something similar in terms of what use they will be making of the Future Growth Fund. I think it's potentially 12 million across the region. So we'll see how that develops. Any other viewpoints on this skills hub? Russell.
Hi, Clyde. I was just going to say I'm with Gareth in terms of all the suggestions seem good suggestions. And although it might be difficult sometimes to find someone to go into the post, I'm with Jake in terms of for some people it'll be attractive to be the head person in a region or in Wales rather than within an authority. And you might find it's attractive from people within the authority to step into the region. It might suit them. And we've got examples now where we've just brought in a DM planner, and we're talking about the DNS side of it. And we haven't really attracted too much interest in the DNS post so far, but actually it seems to be quite attractive to the one person. We don't know whether they're going to apply, but it's always going to be a little bit of a shuffle, isn't it? And to me, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's about working up the proposal. Where's it best to can we afford all of it? And move with it. And the landscape, to me, is very much part of the DNS strategic applications anyway, because they're always going to be big. And certainly the energy things is all about landscape. So it's I'm quite supportive of what's being discussed, and we ought to give it a go. Is my view.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Any other viewpoint before we conclude on this item 4 then? Sarah?
Not so much a viewpoint as just a little bit of clarification. So I think what I'm hearing is there's broad support across the region for going for this. If you're minded to, rather than prioritising them, which is what I thought we might do, is perhaps we work up all three of the ideas and send it in and say, we think these link together. A natural capital or energy infrastructure officer alongside a landscape officer and potentially additional legal support are all required to make this strategic step forward in terms of the main issues that are affecting our region. Now, it may be that there isn't sufficient funds to develop that, but at least we would have developed a package and then we'll see what they suggest. Is that something that's everybody's minded to support? And then my second question would be, obviously I'm under the impression, but this could be wrong, and I welcome your advice, that the CJC itself doesn't necessarily want to employ individual members of staff. So if they were minded to provide us some support for such an officer or officers, under which authority would you want that to fit or align, or would we share it out? You know, I'd rather that they work together as a team, but we will need people to be slotted into places. So when I work up the proposal, I'm going to need to be able to identify that either they would all sit under the park or they'd all sit under Paris or whatever, so that I can get the job evaluations and things done, because Welsh Government will want to see what the grades are.
Yeah. So views on that then, Jake?
No, well, I mean, I just think there needs to be probably. You can dish them out, but I think I'm with you. We say, look, this is part of a hub. They operate in this way that is collaborative. I think the only worry I'd have about them going in the park, as opposed to one of the two substantive authorities, is the park is split across three areas itself, and therefore sort of. I think there are other tensions the park has about where that resource is managed, because it could potentially bleed out of the area or whatever. I'm not saying we shouldn't do shares or what have you, but between either Powys or yourselves, I wouldn't mind where they sat at all. And I think we're grown up enough to have a conversation about, with these things, you just have an employing authority, as you know. So across Growing Mid Wales, we've got people employed in different places. So I don't mind, Sarah. I think there's just a conversation between, let's say, Russell and Diane about how they decide to do that or would agree to do that. It wouldn't be for me to indicate. It's not I don't think it's a political choice. I think it's a practical, technical choice.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in general agreement really of taking forward this, and I assume you, Sarah, are going to start working on this then, is it, as an action?
I am, but Carwyn Jones-Evans has kindly offered some support from Becky to help me with the job evaluation, because he recognised I'm under a bit of the cosh at the minute with other projects. So Becky and Kay in the Growing Mid Wales team will actually work up the proposals into a job description so that we can get that evaluated.
Excellent.
So just for formalities then, so can I have a proposer that what Sarah was mentioning there then, in terms of putting the different options in, etc. Can I have a proposal for that?
I'm more than happy to propose it. I was just looking to see if anyone came first. Gareth is seconding it. Yeah.
So I think we're all in general agreement, just for the minutes, really, just that this was passed. Okay, great. That's brilliant.
And Sarah, I know you weren't weighting them, but if it starts to shake out, I think you did start in the right place, that strategic landscape DNS, and any more we can get on that for the money they give us is really, really beneficial. And I think also, if there's a sort of an action point here to sit alongside that, if there are other conversations like the planning solicitor that you talked about that we need to have, because again, from a political point of view, I know we've got a planning solicitor. I don't know from an officer point of view what capacity there is, etc. So I'm not going to offer that, but I think there's a conversation again to be had between the three officers around, how that might work, because I think that is a shared resource. 106 agreements and things get drawn up, and why replicate? Why are we all writing different, 106 agreements, etc., etc.
Yeah, fair point. No, good. Thanks very much for that, Jake. Okay, we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is updates from any subgroup members. So brief updates on relevant work streams. Who wants to start then?
I'm happy to start from Ceredigion point of view, if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
So as members will be aware, our LDP remains on pause at the moment. We have had discussions with Welsh Government officers, and they understand our rationale. So there's firstly a nutrient issue, but we also have a population issue. So we've delayed our LDP for those reasons, but in the interim, that's allowed us to focus on other work streams, which we found to be sort of more valuable, really. I wouldn't say it's as strong a word as pressure, but they would like us to make a decision as to what our future direction is. So I have agreed that following the elections, when we've got a clearer picture of some of the politics, we will have an internal review of whether or not it's the right time to restart LDP2 for Ceredigion. And that will involve officers as well as members. So that's where we are with the LDP. We're currently finishing off our Shaping Places project. So we should, by the end of this financial year, have got all 13 rural service centre place plans in place. And then the policy team, currently in our business planning, we expect to turn to the delivery of the first integrated constructed wetland in Wales. So we have up to this point been constrained by the fact we were unable to get a licence from NRW as a third party because, and I always say this, frustratingly, the only trusted party is Dŵr Cymru to undertake an integrated constructed wetland in Wales, which I find amusing since 68% of the phosphates in the River Tyfi is as a result of Dŵr Cymru's action. But nevertheless, we have now crossed that bridge and we are shortly to hopefully get a permit. So we're seeking to turn our policy team for the next financial year dedicated to the delivery of the wetland. And then any discussion over LDP2 would have to be in the next financial year. However, we haven't had that conversation with members yet, but that's my intention, if you like. Yeah. And I think members would understand and support that. So that's sort of Ceredigion's policy update, if you like. I'm not sure we have got any major pieces of evidence that we're commissioning where we would collaborate. But if we do, I will, as ever, contact Adrian and Chris and the relevant officers and say, do we need this as a group or do we need this as an individual? Okay.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Sarah. Update from Banai then.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So we consulted on our draft delivery agreement for our replacement local development plan over the summer. So we have updated that on the feedback that we've received. The issue that we're working through at the moment is around resourcing the local development plan team. So we are still in the recruitment phase for a planning policy manager, and we need to have the right resource and experience in place before we bring the final delivery agreement back to our members. So that we're working through that at the moment. In the interim, we're focusing on updating some of our aged SPGs just to try and plug the kind of interim period. And then we continue to engage in the other two CJCs that we're involved in, Southwest and Southeast, in terms of the initial work that's taking place around the SDPs in their region. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gareth. And Powys then, what's going on there? Is anyone here from Powys can give us an update?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're still partly progressing the local development plan in Powys. We've had to sort of spend quite a lot of time, Councillor Behrman's already referred to, trying to identify a gypsy and traveller site, which we have an identified need for. Welsh Government made it quite clear when we commented on our preferred strategy, we couldn't progress for a deposit plan until this issue had been resolved. It's become quite a significant issue, as I'm sure you can all appreciate. It is actually only for 12 pitches we're looking for in the Welsh Pool area, so it's not like the sort of hundreds which Cardiff and Swansea have to find, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's all quite contentious. We've initially looked at our own land holdings. We have had a couple of alternative sites being formally proposed as part of a consultation exercise. We've had well over 600 consultee responses come in, representations, which myself and in the policy team and our housing colleagues are actually going through at the moment. Some of the issues perhaps aren't altogether surprising. There are a couple of gems in there, but the main issue, as invariably the case, is, well, why can't they go to X site, which of course is very often under 3 feet of water when the 7 floods and so on and so forth. So we are actually beginning this process of actually working through these alternative sites and some of the others, which we're looking at in more detail now as part of that process. So it's just going to take time to actually do that before we can either get to a point where the housing team can submit a planning application, or we have to look to allocate a site within the plan. Well, we are down to 2 senior members of staff who departed back in the end of the summer. So that again is sort of concentrating our resource a little bit into what we can deliver. And one of our big issues at the moment we're looking at is viability and making sure that we see the sort of viability which can deliver the affordable houses and so on and so forth, which we feel we need across the county. So that's becoming something we're looking at. I do have a very, very good senior officer who's well into the viability side of things, and so she is actually doing a lot of work to take that forward. I also have been somewhat diverted into supporting the council and preparing a response for the Glyndŵr National Park consultation, which will be going off later today. So doing a couple of other things. So the plan is still progressing. We are looking at sites and in the main at the moment. So it's the emphasis on sites, and we're looking at getting further information back from site proposers to make sure that the sites are genuinely deliverable and viable, as we're required to do for the DPM. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot going on there, Adrian. Okay, thanks very much for the update. Any other points on the update side of things on item 5 of the agenda then? No? Okay. So next is item 6, which is the forward work programme. So based on what we've agreed now on item 4, what are the key milestones and, in terms of submission, etc. So we've got a sort of rough idea of that. Sarah, do you know?
Excuse me. We weren't given any sort of deadline, but I think, from a political point of view, it's worth getting that quite quickly. So my intention was probably early next week now, as I'm tied up this afternoon, to write out a précis of what we've agreed here. And then Becky and Kay have kindly agreed to draft that into some form of job description, or so that I would then twin track the application to Welsh Government with a identified salary range, whilst we also do an internal job evaluation to make sure that's broadly aligned, and see what comes back really, and what kind of response we've got. So it would be my intention to submit this before Christmas to Welsh Government as a brief proposal, and then any further work in terms of actually getting these jobs, if we were successful in the funding through the job evaluation process, will probably happen in the new year, but I would try and get them in at the same time.
Okay, great. Any views on that or comments? Happy? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much for that, Sarah. Yeah, and hopefully we can get that funding and move forward with it. Okay, item 7 on the agenda, AOB, any other business anyone wants to raise or something for the next agenda?
No, but could I just ask a question?
Yep.
So we've just agreed to set Sarah on this this piece of work. Thank you, Sarah. Does that need to go to the CJ board, or do we just get on with that? It might be for Russell or Steve to advise us, really.
Yeah.
I'm going to caveat my reply, but I think we get on with it.
Good.
I think we could check with Clive whether there's a governance reason for it to go up, or it's just one of those things you let people know. But my feeling is we just got to crack on.
Yeah, thank you. That would be good. Oh, Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, Sarah, go for it.
Only my thoughts were the next CJC is set for the 2nd week of January. So I thought if we had, I guess, ask for forgiveness rather than permission and say that we've submitted the bid, we may have heard something by then, we may not, but I can share the bid at the next CJC and say we progressed this piece of work.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. Gareth.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm content with that because obviously we're not actually committing money until it comes through. But I can imagine the final will have to go to the CJC because obviously it's a spend. But up until that point, I think crack on and a bit more of a firmer proposal at that point.
Okay, great. There we are. I think we're all in agreement with that, Sarah. And thanks for the question there. Fair point, Jake, on the governance. Right. So, date of next meeting then. So, roughly how far ahead do we need to go for the next meeting? When will we hear back? It'll be after January, obviously. So,
I would say we wouldn't need to meet before the next CJC. I'll submit the bid before Christmas. I doubt we'll hear before the next CJC, but I'll make the CJC aware of the bid, and then perhaps I'll call. If you're content, I can call an SDP subgroup when we've got some idea of the response from Welsh Government, which I would say is likely to be the end of January, probably.
There we are. That's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, happy with that. Great. Lovely. Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for attending this morning. We've done it in less than an hour, which is brilliant.
Well
No, it's good. No, great conversation, and I think what we're proposing, and hopefully we get the funds for, would be really good, and it'll strengthen our collaboration as the two councils with all the other stuff that we're doing at the moment across the region in terms of funding and the regional development economically, and so yeah, really good. Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. So I'll just call the meeting to an end then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Diolch.
Yeah, bye.